Born from the passion and engineering genius of Colin Chapman, the first Lotus came about in 1948, based on the Austin 7 saloon. Chapman used his engineering skills to produce bodywork that was stressed to increase the overall strength of the car without adding unnecessary weight, a philosophy that will become the company's trademark throughout its history. Chapman began by building cars based on the Austin 7 chassis for closed circuit and trials racing, and after some success, Chapman started selling cars to customers in 1952 and set up Lotus Engineering in the same year. In 1957, the company struck gold with the seminal Lotus 7. Based unsurprisingly on the Mark VI, the car was available with various engines and was in production for an incredible 16 years. In fact, so successful was its design that it's still available today in the Caterham 7 format. Throughout the years, this philosophy for making stylish but back-to-basics sports cars developed, and Lotus were constantly looking for ways of making lightweight, rigid and easy-to-make chassis. By 1962, they'd perfected the now famous backbone chassis, first used in this, the stunning Elan. But the Elan was about more than just groundbreaking chassis design. It was a trend-setter, a true classic open-top roadster, and with a twin-cam 1600 engine, four-wheel disc brakes and four-wheel independent suspension, the car offered incredible road holding. Available originally as a roadster, it was also an optional hardtop and later a coupe. Now this car is obviously one of the most famous of the 60s roadsters, probably only usurped by the E-Type, and that was a different beast altogether. No, this car had a dedicated following of people who appreciated its fine style, great handling and relatively low cost. And the significance of this car isn't in its fame or fortune, it's in its influence, because many two-seater rear-wheel drive roadsters today, the Mazda MX-5, Toyota's MR2 to name but two of a handful, owe its existence to this car. This is the car they all want to be like, but few get there. Now, although Lotus had worked towards gaining a reputation for low-weight, affordable roadsters, such was their reputation for producing great handling cars that their skills were being sought by other manufacturers, and thus in 1963 came the Lotus Cortina. Ford of England came to Lotus to build 1,000 special Cortina GTs with a twin-cam engine to compete in Group 2. The Lotus Cortina sported a completely different rear suspension and light alloy body panels. Top speed was 105 miles per hour, and 0 to 60 came up in 9.9 seconds. So potent was the performance of the Lotus Cortina that they dominated the saloon classes, and Lotus had effortlessly developed another classic. By now, Lotus's reputation was firmly established, but in 1967 they upped the ante once more with the Europa, a car described by contemporary motoring journalists as the closest you could get to a Formula One drive in a road-going car, even though it did look like a squashed van. Powered by a Lotus-modified Renault 85 horsepower engine mounted on a backbone chassis and a fiberglass body, this seemingly meagre amount of horsepower was still enough to get the car from 0 to 60 in under 10 seconds. And even though it's deeply unfashionable and not very pretty, it still represents great fun and handling for the amount of money. So if you've been tempted, here's Ian Royle with how you can get your hands on a Lotus Europa.
Unfortunately, there are not many used examples of the Europa around. Of the 1974 Europa Special, the only models we could find were in America and Holland. In terms of price from America, with 84,000 miles on the clock, that would cost you around £9,500. The 1971 S2 from Holland could be picked up for just under £7,000.
Now, people have said to me, and at the time it was sort of jokingly said, well, you know what Lotus stands for, don't you? Lots of trouble, usually serious. Now, I dispute this, because in the 2 years I used this car to go to work, it never let me down once. The only incident I had was when I touched a wooden fence due to trying to take a corner too fast on the way home one day. So I haven't found it. I found the twin-cam engine to be very reliable.
If you are lucky enough to find a Europa but unlucky enough to have damaged it, spare parts are relatively cheap. For example, a replacement front bumper will only cost you just over £100. A new door hinge kit will be just less than £60. And if you've been suffering from a bit too much road rage, a new horn button can be picked up for just under £50. In terms of what to look out for if you're buying a Europa, a lot of the cars suffer from gearbox problems. As the car is mid-engined, there are long linkages which are very prone to wear and tear. Repair costs aren't massive, but it's one area that you should be aware of.